Hello and welcome back to the Argyle CIO Leadership Forum. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunskill with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. Just a couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker for this session. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience today. At any time during today's event, you can visit those booths from the main agenda page. To ask questions throughout this session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Viren Shah, Chief Digital Officer at GE Appliances. We are so excited to have Viren with us for a keynote titled Advancing Digital Transformation for Exponential Business Hypergrowth. Welcome, Viren. Over to you.
Thank you, Vicki Lynn. Really appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts. And I generally begin these conversations with, in about the 1950s, Einstein was distributing question papers for an exam. And the students asked, Professor Einstein, the questions are the same as last year. And he says, that is true, my friend. The answers are different this time. And that's all we're going to talk about is most organizations or all organizations are looking for exponential business growth because we all know that the external rate of change is faster than the internal capability to change. And that's what we are all struggling with, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So what's the agenda today? The agenda is going to be about, okay, how do we understand some of the digital transformation aspects? What are the key factors? Why is hypergrowth really required? What are some of the challenges and solutions? And what are some of the conclusions we could take? So let's talk about digital transformation. For me, the simplest way to say it is in good old days, there was a problem, we came up with a solution. That's what information technology is all about. Informationalization, as we would call it, it was all about control of the function, control of the data within the function, and control of the process to make sure that we were all lean and efficient and then effective within the function. Now we are getting more and more focus on connected insights, connected user experiences. Anything you want to use the word, you attach connected, that's digital transformation in today's world, or digitalization as we would call it. And the way you do that is you went from applications to platforms. In the good old days, you had a problem, you created a solution, or for lack of better terms, applications. Now we have many such platforms available to us. Examples sake, we have large ERP platforms, we have data and analytics platforms, we have customer experience platforms, we have integration platforms. So we have multiple platforms that have come so that we can now truly connect the dots. And let's talk about some of the platforms here. It's like, is one cloud okay? Two clouds okay? Three clouds okay? Well, all we know is not all clouds are the same. So we do need to be multi-cloud. And how do you operate that? And what do you do with it? But most importantly, none of them are able to do the one thing that another cloud may be able to do. So there is always this tug of war of how do we become multi-cloud. And I think that to me is going to be a very important part is, are you looking at being multi-cloud? The second aspect of it is, how are you making sure, and I have this saying, don't tell me what report you want, please tell me what action we will take once you see the data. And I think that's what data and analytics needs to be all about, is what are the decisions I'm making based on the insights? Last but not the least, and the most important one, is going to be around IoT. Now, we all have IoT of some kind, that we all are thinking about whether we are integrating with it or we are creating it. But IoT And if you're a manufacturing company, IIoT is also becoming very important. And then how do you just apply AI and machine learning on these key platforms to start using, working, and doing different things with it? So that's kind of digital transformation is all about, is utilizing the power of platforms, because the application way is not going to take you very far in the mix. So, well, this is all great stuff, but what is this hypergrowth about? Because I could be doing digital transformation and do incremental optimization and keep getting better over the day. Why do I need to be hyper focused? Why do I need to be fast? Why do I need to do it now? You know, why can't I do it the good old ways? It's a 3-year program. We'll talk about it 3 years later. Well, one, the consumers are expecting connected experiences. The technology is changing pretty fast. And if you have been jumping on this bandwagon of Gen AI, we all know this is evolving by the day, by the week. Increased competition. Everything and anything we do, there is somebody who is just wanting to disrupt us. So as much as there is external disruption, there is also internal disruption that's happening. Efficient operational models. Every day, how we become more and more efficient, there is somebody or something that is getting better. But most importantly, everybody's getting focused on innovation, going back to the rate of change. So these are the key factors that I say is forcing us to self-disrupt, because if we don't self-disrupt, we will be disrupted. So let's talk about some of the aspects of why, while I talked about the platform approach, it is still a little bit of a challenge in how we need to be thinking about it in ecosystem terms. So just like most other companies, the way we scale, the way we have been scaling in the past many decades or centuries is we take our current products and give it to new customers, or we take our new products and take it to new segments. And that's kind of how we keep working through those things, right? Is either you are saying, okay, I'm going to increase my more and more products and keep milking the segments I have, or I'm going to take my current products and start working towards new segments. Amazon has done a fantastic job of utilizing this methodology in the last, decade plus so. But this is still incremental in nature now because it requires a lot of effort. What does not require a lot of effort and you can do hyperscaling is the ecosystems approach. Is how do I take my current capabilities and work with other organizations where we can participate together, but just deploy the current capabilities. And the most important criteria for this is value creation through value distribution. And the only way organizations can do that is by not being selfish. And that to me is probably the most important part, because in any ecosystem, if one of the factors becomes selfish, then we start actually creating a problem statement for the ecosystems where it starts getting polluted a little bit, because then we are all consuming and it starts getting imbalanced. And what I mean by that is, for example's sake, most people would think of us as an appliance company. But what if I told you I can actually be a healthcare company because I have information that tells me, how much water you're drinking every day, and are you going to be dehydrated or not, or are you dehydrated soon or not, or what kind of food you're cooking and how nutritious it is or not, the temperature settings you're using on your microwave oven when you're heating certain types of foods. For example's sake, if you heat sugar and if you're heating more and more sugar over 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the potential of it impacting, causing, your skin to wrinkle faster is there. So there are a lot of perspectives where we really are not saying, okay, you should or shouldn't do it from a health perspective, but our appliances can be a great signal into the healthcare aspect. So once again, are we an appliance company or are we an ecosystem company who can play in the healthcare space? Just one of the many examples of that we are thinking about. So, well, all fine and dandy. So what, and how do we make it happen, and what are the challenges? Well, one of the biggest issues we have is resistance to change. That to me is, besides of who we are, what company we are, what culture we are, what country we are. This is a problem statement, and unless you say, I can tell you why you should change, it really doesn't work. Now, there is always this issue of transition cost, because most of us in the living world of, I have legacy and I have new. And I need to keep running both in parallel, because how do I change wheels of a moving car? And that's always a problem statement that we'll face. And what do you do about it? Well, you just set expectations. The integration complexities, internal integrations of systems, it is one of the hardest things we all face. Because previously, like I said, the platform approach requires a lot of integration. The good old days, the application layer, we really were all siloed and we could manage everything and control within that own silo. Can't do that anymore. And the integration complexities are becoming very critical. So how do you go away from point-to-point integration to start using, API-based approaches? Very difficult to do and takes time. And that to me is a challenge you face. And last not least, but one of the most important ones that can stop everything that you do is just a vulnerability coming, knocking on your door and telling you, hey, you are in trouble. So data security and privacy concerns are huge, and you have to keep working it, and that can stop a lot of things that you do. So what are the solutions? Going back to change management is, how are we embedding change management in everything we do? Change management is actually a very good old day principle. And if you ask me, one of the biggest reasons transformations do not work is because we do not put this in place first. The second aspect of it is, we as information technology function are always considered as cost. Are we a cost function or are we a value creation function? And how are we talking more? You are investing in technology, it's not an expense. Partnerships, most important externally. How are we working with each other, but learning from each other and working together to be going faster? Are you a good partner? Do you even know, what being a good partner means? Because it's always easy where if we are a customer supplier, then it's a transaction, not a relationship. And do we even understand how partnerships means relationships, and what is the give and take mean? Last but not the least, do you have a great cybersecurity program and a data governance programs? Personally, all of us should start making sure that we have a data governance program and managing master data. Otherwise, we won't go very far with what we got. So, conclusion, you have to digitalize for hypergrowth. It's not an option because, like I said, if you don't self-disrupt, somebody's going to disrupt you. Adaptable innovation, keyword being adaptable. Many a times, example, blockchain, it was a solution looking for problems. And many of us got, invested in it, and it was probably a bad idea. Is the innovation adaptable? And that is a very important aspect that you should look at to say, okay, if I invest my time, energy, and focus in this innovation, can it adapt to the changing aspects that will be required? Last but not the least is adoption. how are you? We are going backwards, guys. You know, when I started my career, we were writing what we would call computer applications, which work directly on the PC itself. Okay. Then we wanted major processing power that we could never get on the edge. So what we did is we scaled it back to servers. Then we wanted more and more power and more scalability and hyperscaling and this and that. Well, we put it on the cloud. Well, guess what? Now, because of all the immediate and real time and connected interactions we need, and with the new capabilities of hardware coming up, the compute has to go back on the edge. And we need to start thinking about AI on the edge. And how are we going to do that? And what does that mean? So those are the aspects of, okay, are you looking again to going back to computing on the edge, AI on the edge? And how are we making sure that the data on the edge is becoming more and more available to give instant and near real-time feedback? So that's kind of where I would say, and I'll stop. It is a short, sweet, and simple presentation. The one thing I do want to leave you guys with is this presentation was not ready till 7 p.m. yesterday, and I began working on it at 6 p.m. And I was able to use generative AI to not only give me guidance and a framework, but also help me create the PowerPoints in 1 hour. And that to me is probably the biggest aspect of what I leave you guys with is, if you truly want to get into hypergrowth, we need to start first thinking about how are we going to make ourselves productive and our organization productive. And I truly believe Gen AI is probably one of the fastest ways to go get this done. So while there is a lot of thoughts that I shared using the presentation, one of the biggest things I did want to share with you is the Gen AI gave me the framework, gave me the macro to run it in PowerPoint, and create the PowerPoint for me. With that, I am ready for any questions you may have. So let's see what questions are there. Okay. Question 1 from Lindsay Smith. There are so many ways to digitally transform. Is there a best one? Yeah, I probably would say that the right way to answer that question is becoming more and more platform focused and bringing the data in the center. The control of the data is probably going to be more important than the control of the functionality, because with all the automation that's coming in, the functionality, you will probably be redeploying it every 2-3 years. What we create today, you know, it took us 10 years and 50 years to call legacy now, is probably a 3-year time frame where it'll become legacy. So what I would say is make sure any transformation you're working on digital is very focused on data and control of data and data management, because at the end of the day, you're trying to connect the dots. And that's probably, I would say, is connecting the dots is the biggest focus. How much should budgets be tied to progress? I probably would answer this question a little differently. I would say how much investment you should be making for the outcomes you want. And unless you are able to say this is the value it creates, I think we will all struggle, including me. I've struggled is if it's an idea, but I can't show the value, I don't believe an investment gets warranted. But most importantly, even if, you know, in certain times you can make people believe, but they will give up on it pretty fast. How do we know whether the digital transformation is working and our organization is effectively using it at all? Well, so our we are now the largest appliance manufacturer in the United States. We were, I think, number 4, maybe 5 years ago, and we have almost doubled in size. And what I would say is while we can always focus on very specific KPIs, there is always a forest beyond the trees. So time is very important because digital transformation is more about how do you zero the distance between the consumer and the creator. That to me is the most important part. And that's the only way you know it's working, is you are reducing the number of friction points between the creator and the consumer, whether it's internal stakeholders or whether it's external stakeholders. That's the easiest way for me to say that you know the digital transformation is working, is how are you reducing the friction points? How are you defining your ecosystems? Well, for me, any ecosystem where we are more focused on shared value creation, going back to the comment I made a little bit earlier, is basically saying, okay, how am I eliminating the friction in whatever you do in partnering with others? So Apple is a great example. It's one of the closed ecosystem we have. They have created almost everything within their own universe. Anything you need to do with Apple, only Apple is the interface, right? Now you can switch over to open ecosystems like multiple marketplaces or different organizations, some of the things that Caterpillar is doing, where they are actually using their first party, second party, and third party data to create a whole ecosystem where everybody gets value out of it and nobody controls it. So there are two kinds of ecosystems. One is an open ecosystem, one is the closed ecosystem. Tesla is trying to go closed ecosystem. Apple, closed ecosystem. There are many other organizations who know how to do first party, second party, third party data and use it in conjunction with other partners to create an open ecosystem. So there is no one right answer. Whatever works for your organization. Okay. What were the key success factors for change management in your digital transformation experience? Two big aspects of it. One, having a stakeholder who believes in digital transformation, but most importantly, understands that, it evolves and there is an evolution of the digital transformation. Unless you have a partner like that, it becomes very difficult to do that from a process standpoint. And the second aspect is sponsorship. Who are the key sponsors in your digital transformation? And unless you have the right key sponsors to do that, the challenge of any transformation, digital or not, you will struggle. Most transformation fail because it loses sponsorship. And I think that to me is a bigger aspect of it because it takes time for people to believe in it. Last but not the least, and if you ask me, the most important one is why. Like, for example, say you're going to switch from one cloud to the other. Why? Is your own team knowing and understanding why? And unless you are able to explain that, we will always struggle to implement anything that is required. So those are the key three things is one, make sure your sponsor is bought into the idea. You have a stakeholder who understands that in the transformation, things will evolve and it's okay, but you're joined at the hip in the outcome. And then last, but not the least, is explaining to everybody why. Why is that necessary? The one more thing before I go to the next question is and actually it's a good question here. How would you address all legacy systems to enable digital transformation? And the way I would say it is, a very smart person once upon a time, because I was like, how can this be not possible? It's like everybody sees the problems, everybody sees the frustration, but we still don't want to make the change, and we still want to use and do the old legacy way. And the answer he gave me is, Viren, many times you just have to wait for a crisis. And trust me, it will come. But you have to be ready when the crisis shows up. And if you think about it, how much change did all of us go through during COVID? Why? We had no choice. And I guarantee you, we all deployed multiple new ways of working during COVID than we would have deployed in many, many years of our career. Why? Because there was a crisis, and it was a crisis to exist. Very similarly, one of the big parameters you have to start thinking about is you need to keep working on the old legacy, but at the same time, if you're not getting the traction, just wait and be patient. And then when the crisis happens, you'll be ready. Okay, there's another question. Can you control the hypergrowth to keep it more safe and secure? Safe and secure is a complicated equation, team. It is changing by the day, and just like everything else, you put a new lock, somebody finds a way to break the lock. You put a new lock, somebody's going to try to find a way to break the new lock. How do you make sure that all the doors that you're trying to lock has a good lock, but most importantly, you have good monitors in place to react? And that's where I would say is one of the biggest challenges we will face is, okay, we're going to put the latest and greatest cybersecurity tool to keep managing things. But at the end of the day, there will always be somebody who's going to try to go around the tool or use, us. Actually, the internal threat, as you all know, is bigger than the external threat. And I think that's what we have to be focused on. And training is critical as part of that. User training, to me, is the most imperative on keeping anything safe and secure. What do you think is the next game changer for IT leaders in terms of innovation? Any technologies coming down the pike that you think will have a great impact? I would say the generative AI is probably the biggest one that I've seen in a very long time that's going to have a huge impact on how we work. I equate it to PCs. When PCs were found, if you've not seen, I have just posted on LinkedIn, I equate it to fire. And when fire was, we learned as humankind how to create fire. I equate generative AI, that kind of innovation, and that kind of applicability that we are working with. So Gen AI is probably the biggest one, I would say. And as far as us as IT leaders, I really think we need to start leading more and managing less. And that to me is probably where we have to become students again and start learning again. That's the only way we'll be able to lead. Okay. I got one more minute, and I think we are ready, Vicky, to end the session. I think I have taken all the questions.
Thank you, Viren. Yes, you've answered them all, and that we appreciate that. Thank you for an excellent Q&A session and an excellent keynote. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. This does officially conclude the Argyle CIO Leadership Forum. We'd like to thank today's sponsors, Adobe and Rimini Street, for their support. This event would not have been possible without them. Thank you again for joining us today and engaging in our content. Thank you again, Viren, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.